Hello, and welcome to lesson number 6 of the Drawing is a Skill unit. We'll be learning about shading and layering in drawings. The concept for this lesson is shading. So shading is the addition of light and dark values to a drawing. It's really about representing the way that light hits an object and how that shadow is created. And then also how to create the illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface. The mindset for this assignment is drawings are created in multiple layers. Drawings generally are not created all at once. Usually you start out with some loose lines, add those contour lines, figuring out where the shadows belong, adding light values to start before you start to do the next layer, which is to start adding those darker values in once you're sure of where the light sources are. And then finally adding those details once you're absolutely sure where those values are. And then the final polish, increasing the highlights, increasing the shadows. So shading is all about value, or the lightness or darkness of a color. And here we see a value scale that represents light to dark and all of the different values in between. And values can be created in a lot of different ways in drawing. You can do cross-hatching, smudging, scumbling, stippling. We're going to be using smooth shading. So the first thing that we're going to do for this lesson, we're going to be drawing some water droplets, realistic water droplets, okay? And you're going to have a reference image, and I want you to identify the different values that you see in this reference image just to start. So first we see the highlight. That's the lightest point of in the drawing, and it's represented over here on the value scale. And then we see the cast shadow. So this is the area that the object, prevents the light getting to, and that's usually the darkest value. Then there's the core light on the lighter side, and that can be represented by white or some of the lighter grays in the value scale. Then we have the core shadow, and this is represented more by the darker grays, almost blacks. And then the midtones. The midtones are those middle grays. So whenever you're drawing from a reference, try to identify where those different values are. So we have the highlight, the core shadow. See over here, we have the core light in the drawing, core shadow in this drawing, and then some midtones. So let's take a look and see how this drawing was created. Okay, so the values are identified. The next step is to lightly sketch the contour lines into your sketchbook. Notice how I'm circling around and around. I'm trying to create the outline of this water droplet. And then I'm also going to be drawing in the internal details like the highlight and then the shape of the cast shadow. Sketch these super lightly so you can erase them later or draw over them. The next step is to add light values to areas with shadows. So here I'm sketching really lightly, shading in the area where the cast shadow will be, and then other areas where it will be darker in this water droplet. Practice using light pencil pressure. And this takes practice. Really loosen up and try your best not to get too dark too soon, because you'll do that when you go back into the drawing. Experiment how you hold your pencil too. Maybe this overhand sketching technique works better for you. The next step, step 3, is to begin to add some darker values. Now that you understand where those values belong, now take a look at your reference image. And don't forget, we are still observing our reference image, and start shading in the areas that you know will be dark. Usually the cast shadow is the darkest value. When you're using a reference image to add value, it's important to look at the location of the different values. For example, where are the darkest parts? Where does the value start to shift from dark to medium and then to light? Take your time and build up those values in layers. Step number 4 is to look for the details in your drawing. So in this reference image, the details would be those little water bubbles inside of the water droplet. So go ahead and add those contour lines in, and then continue shading around them and adding in the values just as you see them in the reference image. So they're darker at the bottom and then lighter at the top. Sometimes an area will get too dark, maybe you shaded over it too much. Use your eraser. Erase that area to lighten up the value. You can always go back in and shade it later. Drawing is always a push and pull back and forth between certain lines being in certain places, certain values being in certain places. So never be afraid to go back and erase. Remember, erasing is not for mistakes, it's for improvement of accuracy. Smooth shading takes time. You can see this is the drawing in real time. I suggest just kind of getting into a Zen mode, put some music on, and really just enjoy the process of lightly shading layer upon layer. I've sped up the video in a lot of areas just to keep the process moving faster so that you guys can get to drawing. But remember, to draw and to shade accurately, it really takes time and focus to do a good job. Don't forget to shade in the background also. This background in the reference image is actually really dark. I decided not to make my background that dark, but I do find it helpful if you shade in the background to really define the object that you're drawing. As you start to add new elements to your drawing, look back at the things that you've already drawn within the same drawing to see if they need to be changed at all. Here I noticed that the values in the first water droplet that I drew weren't dark enough near the highlight, so I went back and I added some darker values in there. As you can see, the second water droplet that I drew has much darker values in the core shadow and the cast shadow. So always reference your drawing, look back and forth at the reference image, as well as look and observe very closely what you already created. All right, so there's the finished example. Head on over to Google Classroom and start assignment 17D. I can't wait to see what you create.